On May 8, 2023, an award-winning filmmaker trudged through the Carpathian mountain forests with his camera and tripod in hand. After a long search, he finds a good spot to set up his equipment and get some bird footage. When the unexpected happens, a ferocious bear charges towards him with lightning speed, with the aim of tearing him to pieces. For what seemed like an eternity, the man embarked on a losing battle where his life depended on it. To outsiders, it is called the Carpathian Mountains, located in Central Europe, home to beautiful birds, rivers, and serene lakes, reflecting the majestic beauty around it. Streams and mountains that would take your breath away. Mount Gerlachowski Szczyt in the High Tatras, part of the Carpathians, proudly wears the crown of being the highest peak in the entire range, standing tall at 2,655 meters. Tourists, mountain climbers, and general adventurers love to come here to create memories and experiences in this amazing gift of nature. To the untrained eye, the scenery is so beautiful. It is easy to lose yourself and simply enjoy the plains, close your eyes and take it all in. It forms an arc that's roughly 1,500 kilometers long, and it is the third longest European mountain range. But here's the twist. The Carpathian Mountains are also home to some of the most dangerous, vicious, and ferocious animals that ever walked on Earth. From wolves to wild cats, red deer, wild boars, and of course, the deadliest brown bears. And one of these bears was about to have a clash with Andreas, a clash to the death. He was innocent, a 62-year-old man who made a living making animal documentaries, and on the morning of May 8, 2023, he set out at the crack of dawn with his equipment to capture rare birds. Now here is where it gets more interesting. As a professional filmmaker, he had always ventured into the jungle to capture footage, and as a result, Andreas had been attacked by wild animals before. Not once, but twice in his career. It was enough to stop him, to hang up his equipment and quit, but even at the cost of his life, Andreas kept on going deep into the forests to get footage. It was his job and passion. Also, he considered himself lucky. He had been involved in 2 attacks so far and had somehow survived with barely more than a few scratches. But as the saying goes, third time's the charm. Or in this case, the tragedy. Finally, after hiking for a few miles along the forest, he finally found the perfect spot to station himself and take pictures of the birds nesting in the distance. One by one, he pulled out all his equipment. He assembled his tripod in front of him and balanced the camera on it. Then he put down his bag and waited. It was a day like any other, and he had done this regularly for decades. But what he didn't know was that just a few yards away, an especially angry bear was lurking behind the bushes. He was moments away from a bear attack, and this was going to be nothing like the other ones he had experienced. Oblivious to what was about to happen, Andreas carried on with his bird watching, but something did not feel right. At first, he thought he had chosen the wrong spot and he should move, but he decided against that. That wasn't it, it was something else. Then, he suddenly got a chilling sense that he was being watched. Again, he ignored his intuition and faced his camera. And that was when he heard aggressive rustling of leaves around him. As soon as he turned to see what that was, his eyes widened in shock. All at once, his life flashed before his eyes, for the most vicious-looking bear was thundering towards him, and it was only a few yards away. Andreas did not have time to think. Neither did he have time to call for help. His only mission now was to stay alive. It all happened so fast, too fast to do anything in time. And he also realized that running from the bear was probably the worst thing he could ever do. So in a frenzy, he searched his mind for what to use to defend himself. The way he was right now, he was a sitting duck, and that was when something snapped in his mind. The tripod. In one swift movement, Andreas grabbed the tripod and held it in front of him. It was his only line of defense. As soon as the bear got close, he drove the tripod into the bear's mouth in an attempt to derail the bear, but it didn't work. Now this is where all hell broke loose. Andreas could see that the bear was even more angry, so he tried to do the only thing he could at this point: protect his head and neck. But did that work? Not really. Despite his efforts, the bear finally sunk its teeth into his upper left arm, and despite the adrenaline coursing through Andreas, he felt the pain. And it hurt more than anything he had ever felt in his life. Then, the bear got on top of his chest and began pressing Andreas to the ground. He could not breathe well, and the bear was so close to his face he could hear the loud growling and could even smell the hairs on the bear's body. Apparently, the bear must have been pissed about the fact that Andreas was smart enough to cover the meatier parts of his body with his hands. So, in a fit of deadly rage, the bear tossed him this way and that and tried to find a soft spot on his body to dig his claws and teeth into again. Eventually, the bear found a small opening to his arm and face, and it dealt a devastating blow, causing the blood to gush out of Andreas's body. His arm was in so much pain, he was sure it was fractured. He could also feel the blood flowing from his face and head. He was not sure the extent of the damage already done, but he knew he was losing a lot of blood, and the bear was still not done with him. Still in the attack, the bear launched at his lower left arm. The bear's biting and chewing was so strong, he could feel his bones breaking in his body as a result of the bear's incessant attack. By now, the bear was on top of him. He could hardly breathe properly, and blood was seeping from multiple areas in his body. Andreas was getting tired and weak, but the bear didn't care. It delivered more scratches and deep cuts with its biting and slashing, and for a moment, Andreas thought he was dead. Then, the strangest thing happened. Just as he was slowly losing hope and consciousness, the attack stopped. There was no more growling, no pressing weight on his body, and the entire attack had stopped. But he had to be sure, so he stayed there for a few more seconds before slowly opening his eyes. There was nothing around him. The bear had gone. But while that was great news, he still wasn't all clear yet. He needed to get some help. But how? He was in the middle of a very unforgiving forest. There was nowhere to run to. But in the end, Andreas managed to call for help, and someone even offered to undertake the 22-hour drive to his home so he could get help. By the time he was found in the forest, there was blood dripping all over his face. You could barely see the skin on his hands, as it was covered in blood from shielding his face and neck from the bear. As he was eventually wheeled into the emergency room, Andreas was in pretty bad shape. His entire scalp had been bitten off by the bear, and more blood was oozing from his arm. On top of that, pieces of his bones needed to be taken out of his body so he could have a chance at survival. The doctors had minutes to save his life. All the while, Andreas was slipping into unconsciousness, and soon it would be permanent. First, the doctor stopped the bleeding on his arm and then proceeded to his scalp. It looked like the remains of a prey after a predator had chewed it up, and that was exactly what it was. With a needle and thread, the doctor sewed up his scalp ever so carefully. Any small damage to the brain could be catastrophic. Then, they cleaned his arm and put it in a cast. Thankfully, Andreas came out of surgery alive, but he needed some time to heal. But despite all he had been through, Andreas claims that attack was all his fault, and he should have known better. However, the question remains, since he had survived 2 previous attacks, both in Alaska and now this one, which was even worse than the last 2, Will the award-winning filmmaker take this as a sign to retire and hang his equipment? Or will he keep defying all odds and daring danger and death? Only time will tell. This next attack, however, will leave you both horrified and filled with awe. Check it out here.